don't really know how to start this video, but I do know how this project started. Last winter, I picked up a basic budget-friendly 20-watt laser engraver. I had always wanted one, partly for specific projects that needed this kind of tool, but also because it's just cool and I like to collect CNC machines. And it's another tool to learn to experiment with and see what I could create. And at first it was fun trying out small things, getting the hang of it, learning the software, but I quickly ran into a problem. After an hour of use, I would smoke out my entire basement and I couldn't engrave anything besides wood. Materials like stump rubber give off toxic fumes, and that's a no-go without proper ventilation. So I needed a fume extractor and I needed an enclosure. That brings us here. It took me nearly 4 months just to get to the part where you're watching me cut plywood, partly because it's been freezing outside and no insulated garage means no woodworking in the winter, but also because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Not extreme, but I definitely want things done a certain way. I wanted the enclosure to fit in my office so I could run the laser while working on other stuff, and I wanted it to have its own dedicated stand. I didn't want just the enclosure top. I wanted it to look good as well and fit my space with all the white furniture that I have right now. So I started designing with those goals in mind and ended up with this beast that you saw earlier. Now, don't mind the rough cuts happening in the background. I'm working with pretty basic tools, just making the most of what I've got. And before I dive into this build, let me explain a bit about the cabinet design. One of the main constraints was size. The whole thing has to fit through the doors of my house and my office, which means the outer dimensions cannot exceed 29 inches, sometimes even less. But internally, I needed at least 28 inches of space for the laser itself. So I compromised with an external footprint of 30 by 30 inches, but that meant it had to be fully disassemblable. I have no idea if this word exists, but I'm gonna use it right now. And I didn't want a permanent fixture like a kitchen cabinet. I wanted something that I could move later, disassemble it, put it in my basement or in my garage. And that's how I came up with a 5-part modular system, which consists of a bottom plate, 2 side cabinets without tops or bottoms, and a top plate and the main enclosure. I also wanted all the electronics, air pump and air assist hidden out of sight, so I designed the 2 cabinets to form an enclosed compartment in the back. And just for fun, I added 2 45-degree cuts on the top and made it a single top opening door, because who likes boring square boxes, right? Of course, I couldn't stop there. I challenged myself even more by creating full-blown build plans and designing a 3D model of the enclosure. Hinges, moving parts, all of it. I had never done that level of detail before, so this was definitely a new territory, and that is something that I want to do for all of my projects coming up, kinda being a professional. So here I am finally cutting some plywood. I chose Baltic birch from Home Depot. It's a bit pricier, but it was worth it for this project. Also, I don't even have a truck, so I get materials wherever I can. I try to be extremely precise with every cut, but I'm working with a handheld circular saw and an aluminum bar from Harbor Freight. And let me tell you, this process made me really want a track saw. But it wasn't a smart purchase right now, so I stuck it out. Judging by the changing light in these clips, yeah, this plywood cutting saga lasted about 2 days, but in the end the cuts were clean and I was really happy with the result. A CNC machine, and you better believe I was going to use it. I used it to cut perfectly round holes in the plywood and carved out a fancy side vent for airflow, because I didn't want to accidentally create a vacuum chamber inside of the enclosure. Now, the vent might look a bit oversized, but there is a reason for that. My plan was to attach a HEPA filter on top of it, which would naturally restrict airflow, so I didn't want to risk making it too small and choking off ventilation. That's also why I went with a rectangular shape. It's the same measurements as the filter I chose. In theory, the HEPA filter should help prevent air from flowing back to the room when the air pump is off, keeping any residual fumes inside of the enclosure. But now as I'm editing this video, I still haven't tested that part yet. But one day I'll grab some filters and see if I was right. Fingers crossed. Now, I don't know if I'll get any hate in the comments for this, but yeah, I went with pocket holes for this build. I mean, it's a plywood cabinet. Pocket holes just made sense. It's quick, strong enough, and honestly, kind of satisfying to cut them all the time. That said, I definitely forgot how tricky it is to hold everything steady while driving pocket screws, especially without the fancy clamps. Not in the budget right now, so I had to improvise and use whatever I have. And yeah, a few mistakes slipped in. You'll probably spot them later. Just pretend you didn't, okay? Anyway, back to cutting plywood. I know I just said I was done 2 minutes ago, but turns out I wasn't. The top door of the enclosure was giving me a hard time. It's just too awkward to cut ahead of time, so I ended up going back and forth between cutting and building. Let me show you what I mean. Take this piece for example. 14.27 inches wide. I thought about rounding it up, kind of make it easier to cut, remodeling the whole model, and then I just stopped thinking. So I waited until the rest of the construction was done, laid this panel right on top of the structure, and traced the lines where they actually needed to be. And it worked, kind of. We'll see. On the next day, after making my mostly perfect 22.5 degree cuts, I was able to test fit it, and in a few adjustments, I was ready to go back to CNC and cut out the windows in this top door parts. After some solid research, I found the right glass, well, acrylic panel, for the windows. It was the only affordable option I could find that was actually rated for my laser's wavelength. Even at $79 for a small piece, I wasn't going to compromise on safety. And that's another big reason why I wanted this enclosure so badly. The laser beam was always exposed, completely out in the open, and while I could wear safety goggles while it was running, I was constantly worried that my dogs might accidentally catch a glimpse of the beam. I always tried to keep them out of the basement while I was working, but honestly, when it comes to safety, I believe prevention is always better than just being careful. This was another first for me in this project, cutting acrylic on the CNC. I got a single fluid bit specifically for the job, and I secured the piece with the classic blue tape and CA glue trick, and it worked. First try, no test cuts, because yeah, I guess I am that person. So what happened here is, for some reason my camera just stopped recording it and recorded like 1 second of just the board swaying on the table. But yeah, I mean, looks like it's good. I have measured the angle here, and it's 134.4. So the error that I made is like 0.6, 0.7 degree is something I can live with, I guess. Yeah, but yeah, that's a success right here. Good. So yeah, you've probably noticed by now, this project was a little bit too hard, and so is this video. It's a little bit of a mess. I struggled throughout the whole process, and I tried to record everything, and sometimes I was just standing there looking in the camera, looking at my plans, trying to figure out how to make this cut. And I only had one shot all the time because of the limited material that I have. And I couldn't just go and buy some more because it's, again, I need to rent a truck, go to Home Depot, find the plywood, get it back together. It's a lot. As for the cabinets, I don't have much to say. They're very basic, but I did want adjustable pin shelves, so I needed to drill the holes first before assembly because I don't think I will be able to reach with the drill while it's assembled. Funny enough, to this day I still haven't made the shelves yet, but I will make them someday, probably next week. Before sanding and painting, I wanted to make sure everything fit and worked, so I did a dry run with most of the hardware on the next day, and to my surprise, it all worked exactly how I imagined. At this point, no matter how many small errors I've made, I'm just happy it works. This is my first big solo project, no help, and a decent chunk of money invested, so I'm calling it a win. I also used some IKEA style furniture hardware that I found on Amazon, which lets me assemble everything without glue or weird insert screws. It keeps the whole build modular and movable, and they were pretty easy to install. I also picked up these little hold down clamps. They secured the enclosure to the top plate by forcing it down, and I was skeptical they would be strong enough, but they turned out to be very solid. It was a pleasant surprise. As mentioned earlier, here's me fixing my mistakes. Turns out some cuts were off by about 1/8 of an inch, and a few angles weren't quite 90 degrees. Not proud of it, but let's just pretend that didn't happen. I thought about it, and my solution was just to sand it down, to the point where I'm satisfied with how it looks. After that, I broke down the edges with quick hand sanding and sometimes palm sander, just to prevent sharp corners and chipping. Then I used the round over bit on the router to soften the top edges, just to make it look nicer, nothing else. I guess one of the cuts was a little bit too deep, but that's okay, I just thought it's funny. I finished sanding most of the parts and I decided to try something new, hiding all the exposed plywood edges with wood filler before painting. Just for fun, just for that fancy look, and yes, it cost me a few extra hours of sanding and also 24 hours of waiting for it to dry. But I think the finished result was actually very nice, especially considering it my first time trying this technique, and I did not the very best paint job, but more about that later on. After waiting for the edges to dry and sanding everything down again for the second time, I had a sudden change of heart. I decided I no longer wanted to mount the air assist pump to the side of the cabinet, so on the fly I whipped up a small corner shelf instead. Quick, simple, maybe not so accurate, but it did the job. And since we're talking about changes, next day I also did 2 more holes on the sides of the cabinets for the wires. For the simplicity, I painted each side with 2 coats of regular primer and I used a small foam roller. However, to paint the inside of the cabinets, I set up my tarp curtains and went with a spray paint. It took a few failed attempts to get the mix right, but once I dialed it in, it turned out great. As for the finish coat, I have no footage of that because honestly, it was a disaster. I could not get the mix to work at all. I ended up scraping off dripping paint with shop towels and I just gave up. I finished it by hand with a brush and a foam roller as well. And it's not my best paint job, but at that point, I just wanted to finish the project. I used epoxy to glue the glass in and to secure the wire hole collars. I designed the collars myself and printed them on flexible TPU so wires can pass through the petals. After that dried, I sealed the windows with acrylic caulk to clean up the edges and seams around the glass. And now finally it's time to assemble everything in its new home where it will live for the foreseeable future. Now that you've seen the process, let me show you the result. And there it is, right in my room, right beside my computer. Let me adjust the camera so you can see it better. Now, I did a few things with this build that I didn't record or I didn't even mention in the video, and I didn't explain it. And this is, for example, this handle right here. These two parts are 3D printed and the middle part is the copper pipe that I had laying around, and I just cut it off and polished it by hand. And it works just fine, and it's pretty solid. I did remove one of the gas struts inside because it was making this noise that I just couldn't stand. And I couldn't fix it because one of the metal parts is bent, and that's how it came, so couldn't fix it. Now, regarding the build, one of the things that I installed is RF control for the air assist pump. I noticed that most of the time I have air assist on the same setting. I don't even adjust it. I don't see a point in it. Maybe I'll run into it later, but for now it keeps running on the same setting all the time. And all I need to do is to turn it on and turn it off. Now I have control for the air pump right here. I do need to reach out to it, but I didn't want to put it somewhere here where all the wires will be exposed, or I couldn't run the wires through this cabinet because otherwise I wouldn't be able to disassemble it so easily. Now, as you've seen in the video, I was installing some 3D printed parts in the end, and that's to make sure that this laser is not going anywhere. I 3D printed legs for the laser itself. I just want it to be fixed all the time in the same position. And if I have to move it, I can move it. I can take it out. I can put it back in the same place. I don't have to calibrate anything at all. So the same thing is for the bed. The bed doesn't move at all. Now I haven't done anything with it yet, but I will have a couple more shelves. I think even not 4, but maybe like 6. Now you're probably wondering if the air pump works correctly, and I can show it to you by turning it on and showcasing the airflow. And the paper stays in place. That means there is suction. Of course, some of the seams are not perfect. I can feel the air coming in through the seams. I might fix it later, but when I'm cutting stuff, I didn't really notice anything, any odors, any smoke coming into the room. Now I want to say thank you for watching the whole video. It was a big project for me, and it was tough, I'm not gonna lie. If you can subscribe to my channel or drop a like, drop a comment, whatever you feel like, that would be perfect. And I'm hoping I'll be making you something new, somewhere soon. Hopefully maybe next week. We'll see.